Hello and welcome to FLW TV. My name is Ben Wignall and this is the debate show. In the latest instalment of the series, we will be discussing the free scoring Blackburn Rovers forward Ben Brereton Diaz and if he's ready for the Premier League with a lot of transfer interest surrounding his name. Joining me this afternoon is my colleague Toby Wilding, and as a Rovers fan himself, and he's the perfect man to talk about this. Toby, how are you doing? I assume you're doing very well after Blackburn's recent run of form. It's taken them up the championship table.
Yeah, absolutely loving this. Every credit to them. It's been a fantastic response from the Fulham debacle at the start of this month. I don't think at that point anyone quite expected them to end November 5th in the Championship, only a couple of points off third place. So, yeah, against all the odds, it's starting to look like a really good time to be a Blackburn fan. But as I think we might be covering with a few different situations with regards to players and obviously Brereton himself, that is something that could potentially still change in the next couple of months, but we'll see.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, if any Blackburn fans are watching and want to give us your thoughts on Brereton and the debate question at hand, please do leave us a comment on Facebook or YouTube and please drop a like on the video. With that being said, let's get straight into it. So Brereton's been at Blackburn for now over 3 years. It does feel like he's, been around a long time now. He came into the Nottingham Forest side at such a young age, but it's fair to say his first few seasons at Blackburn weren't particularly the best. One goal in 25 matches in his first season and then one in 15 the next. Toby, do you think too much was expected of Brereton in those first few seasons? Obviously he came with a big price tag. I think it was 7 million that Blackburn paid for him, which was, a pretty decent fee for a second tier side at the time. But I think it's fair to say he didn't live up to that price tag in, the first couple of seasons he was at Ewood Park.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I think, as you say, when any player arrives with that sort of price tag, and especially at this level, you are expecting a big impact from them. And that didn't really come from Brereton over those first couple of seasons. I think maybe it could have done. Things didn't really work out for him. There were a lot of big chances that I remember him missing in those first couple of seasons, where you're thinking, I'm tallying these up, and he could have had double figures this season. And in the end, as we say, it was just one in each of his first two campaigns. But I definitely think the price tags had an impact on that. I mean, he was only 19 when he arrived at Ewood Park, and obviously there was a lot of expectation. But in fairness to him, if you looked at his record at Forest prior to that move to Rovers, he only had, say, I think it was 9 goals in 57 games. So to be fair to him, he wasn't exactly the most prolific striker at that stage of his career as it was. So perhaps, the fact that a few of his goals had been sort of high profile ones perhaps raised that expectation more than it should have been from a more consistent perspective. And sort of that probably did hamper him in the first few seasons. But as we're seeing now that things are clicking, the talent was always there, and it's just taken a bit of time to unlock it, really.
Yeah, I think you're right. The talent was always there, and that's why Blackburn did want to, stump up that £7 million fee, at such a young age. Well, those first two seasons at Ewood Park were slightly disappointing, but obviously last season, the one that was behind closed doors, it was kind of a market improvement, wasn't it? 7 goals, 5 assists from 40 appearances. He's predominantly playing out wide with Adam Armstrong through the middle. It did look like a sign he was kind of getting suited to Tony Mowbray's way, wasn't it? Obviously, with Adam Armstrong getting all the credit for his goals last season. Toby, did you think Brereton deserved a little bit more of the spotlight for his improvement? I think Blackburn fans, the ones that I know, were kind of split on him even last season when he was contributing to goals and assists. But do you think he deserved more credit for his performances?
Yeah, I do. I was impressed with him last season. I think, as you mentioned, the fact that what it was behind closed doors last year potentially did help him. As we were saying, the weight of that expectation of the fans, and when you've got thousands in the ground, and you've not potentially delivered what you should have done before, then that is going to be weighing on the back of your mind, perhaps a bit more when they're actually there and you're in those positions. So the fact that they weren't potentially helped him. And I also think that had things worked out in a better way for him last season, then that record of goals and assists could have been even better. I know sort of the first few months of the season, he was looking really good. It was almost a case of this is the player we expected to get a couple of years ago. And then I remember around December time, I think it was a 2-1 win over Millwall. He got forced off in that. There was with a sort of knee problem. It took him a sort of good month or so to get back from that. And I always think Brereton's a bit of a momentum and a bit of a confidence player, as we were touching on there. So then the fact that he lost that momentum with that time out the side, it took him, even once he was fit and playing again, it took him a bit of time to get back up to speed. So had that not happened, I do think he could have had an even better record in front of goal for Rovers last season, and then he would definitely be getting the sort of attention that he is now, and that would have been perhaps more deserving of his efforts when he was on top form last season.
Well, he did get attention from one certain area of the world. Despite that improvement last season, it probably still would have come as a surprise for a lot of people in this country to see Brereton get that, infamous call up to the Chile national squad after, the 2020-21 season had finished. Obviously, we all know the story of, how his mother's Chilean and there was a social media campaign to get him selected, and it ended up working. And, he's really taken to international life quite well, hasn't he? Scored 3 goals in 9 games, including in the Copa America, which, is a tournament where he's really thrown in the deep end that with a lot of talented players in. And obviously, because of that, his stocks rose exponentially. Toby, do you think his time with Chile over the summer is the main reason, to his rapid improvement in terms of goal scoring this season?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that has been a big part. Like I say, confidence player, and that gave him a lot of confidence, because his performances for Chile, watching a few of them, was really impressive. He had the goal on his first start against Bolivia. He had an assist in his next game. So right from the start, he was making an impact. That helped that he got off the mark quickly. Obviously, that's always good in terms of getting the fans behind you. It's something that, as we've touched on, didn't quite work for him at Rovers, but it did on international duty with Chile. I think that sort of the calibre of players he was playing alongside as well, the likes of Arturo Vidal and Alexis Sanchez, if you're training alongside players who've played to the sort of level that they had and making an impact, as we say, with his goals and assists as well, that's got to be huge for your confidence. And absolutely, that's been a big factor for him. And obviously, the fact that he's got them fans behind him, he's got a massive following in Chile now. I think, as we say, because of what he's been doing over there, you can't blame anyone for that sort of interest that he's attracting, and the fact that he's now feeling that backing he's got, not just from his teammates or his managers, he's got backing from supporters here at Ewood. He had it from supporters in Chile over the summer, and it's just, for anyone, that's going to give you a huge lift, and we're really starting to see that pay off on the pitch now, I think.
He's definitely become a cult hero down there, Brereton Mania, running wild and all that. Don't forget, if you're a Blackburn fan or a neutral fan in general, please do leave a comment on Brereton's situation if you do think he's ready to make that step up to the Premier League. Of course, we have to talk about the current campaign, which is the reason why we are discussing this topic. As it stands, he's got 16 goals in 20 outings, and only Alexander Mitrovic can better that with a ridiculous 21 strikes in 19. He scored all kind of different goals, Brereton, hasn't he, from solo efforts to Portugal's goals. Toby, aside from, the Chile Cup call-up that we talked about, that's, clearly worked wonders for his confidence, what else do you think's changed in his game, this season, particularly at Blackburn? Is it, solely down to him and his confidence, or do you think his teammates have been helping him to, become that better player and giving him a lot better service?
I think there is an element of, as we say, confidence, definitely, but there's other issues as well that have come into this. I think if you look back at sort of when his goals were scored over those past couple of seasons, we were talking about that first season, it took him until sort of the last couple of games of the campaign to score. And then, as we've been saying, he's a momentum player, so he didn't really have time to build on that before the season ended. And then the 2019-20 season again, it took him until, because he hadn't got that momentum perhaps, and then there was injuries playing their part and everything. It was the penultimate game of the season when he finally got off the mark. And the difference that time around was because of obviously the delayed end to the campaign. It meant there was a shorter turnaround, so there was a bit more of something there for him to build on going into that season. So that, I think that played a part in him starting last year really well. And then obviously, as we've touched on already, the injuries and whatnot that played a part in sort of maybe a bit of a stop-start season last year in the end. But then this year, obviously, we had the Chile thing during the summer. That's not only is it giving him confidence, it's giving him something to run with. You know, he's not had that break where he's been able to sort of lose any form, so to speak. And he's carried that into this season. And then also, obviously, the change in circumstances with regards to the rest of the Rovers squad. I mean, you look back at when he's been here in other seasons, you know, when he first came, there was Danny Graham and Bradley Dack, who were, you know, sort of the chief goal getters for Rovers. So he was sort of almost playing second fiddle to them. Obviously, last couple of seasons, there's been Adam Armstrong had 16 in that first season when we were sort of looking into the delayed end, that sort of he stepped in where Dack was absent due to injury. So that sort of again kept Brereton a bit to the side last season. Obviously, as we say, it was an improvement from Brereton, but he still had Armstrong's 28 goals. So he was understandably hogging the headlines. And again, it sort of kept Brereton a bit to the side. So I think this season, though, it is on him. And I think he is absolutely thriving in that role. And yeah, so I can't really see that changing if he continues to keep his fitness up, which, as we say, has been an issue last season. So I think that's massive for him, the fact that he is now the main man and he's clearly loving that role.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see if he can, you know, keep that scoring record up. And of course, one of the, you know, good stories of the season, there was a few Blackburn fans with bets on him to score 20 or more goals for the club this season at ridiculous odds. You know, it went kind of viral, something like 1,000 to 1, and cashed out for a nice profit, which is always good to see. We've got a few comments here. Loving the Chile shirt from Liam, repping it proud.
Got to keep it on brand.
Got a comment from Helen saying easy to forget he's still only 22. Yeah, he's, like we said earlier on, he's been around for a while. You know, he got his debut for Forest when I think he was around 17 years old, and like Toby said, he played around, you know, 50, 60 games for them in the league. So, you know, he's very experienced, you know, for a 22-year-old. And we've got a comment from EFL lover here. I absolutely love watching Brereton Diaz. Toby, do you think his best role is through the middle or out on the flanks? He's played in both positions this season, and when Armstrong was in the team, you know, he was out on the left, but, you know, he's came into the middle a little bit more this season, hasn't he, Toby? Where do you think his best role is?
It's an interesting one, that, because he seems to sort of almost thrive wherever you put him. But I do quite like him down that left hand side. I think he's got the pace to make breaks down that side. He's capable of cutting in and you know get curling in. I think his whole goal was an excellent example of that. Again, sort of similar. You know, a lot of his runs come from that side into the area, gets him into a great position to apply the finishes. So I like him on that side, and that also unlocks a couple of the other players. Sam Gallagher, obviously a big physical presence. He can play out on the right wing as well, but it gives you that option of putting him central. Tyree Stolen as well. He can go. I mean, he's not the sort of player you'd look at from a physical perspective and say he's an obvious centre forward candidate, but it works for him. And I think that's just a massive asset that Rovers have at the minute. The fact that all three of those players can sort of drift anywhere across the forward line you want them to when they're fit. So I think that's really working in Rovers' favour. But I'm going to say I do really like him down the left with the positions he gets into down that side, and then the sort of finishing touches he can apply from that position.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the more effective players in the Championship in that role. But, you know, will he still be at the club in January? We know Brereton's contract does only run until the summer of 2022. But however, Blackburn do have a 1-year extension in their favour, you know, which will almost certainly be triggered in January. So should Brereton not agree to a new extension himself. Toby, can you see him wanting to sign a new contract? We're obviously getting closer to January, and he's not the only player in the same boat. You know, several other key players at Rovers yet to sign new contracts. You know, you Rothwell, Lenihan, Nyambi, and a few other players. But, you know, in Brereton's case, there's interest from all over the place. He's an established international now. Could you potentially see his head being turned mid-season by interest from Premier League clubs and perhaps ones from abroad?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think any player is going to be to be interested by that sort of links with their name, because any player, I think, understandably, is going to want to play at as high a level as they can. So I think Rovers will have a bit of a challenge on at the minute in terms of potentially longer term contracts. I don't think there's any doubt. They do absolutely have to get that 12-month extension triggered, because I mean, yes, that might mean they lose him for less in the summer than they would do in January. But when they're in the position that they are now, fifth in the table, only a few points off third, they've simply got to keep their main man for goals if they are going to have any hope of winning promotion this season. And then, of course, the other thing they've got to remember is if they do lose him in the summer, you look at sort of how much they got for Adam Armstrong last summer. He went for, I think it was around 15 million. Now, the difference here is, while obviously you would expect Nottingham Forest to have a bit of a sell-on clause, I don't think, from sort of what I'm reading elsewhere, it would be as big as the 40% that Newcastle were due from Armstrong. So they could still get, if Brereton keeps scoring to the level he is now, you would expect, given the precedent that Southampton set with that Armstrong sale, that Rovers can still demand a sort of 8-figure fee for Brereton, and then they would take a bigger chunk of that, and that can in turn be reinvested in the squad over the summer. So I think it's just absolutely essential that they trigger that extension. And if they do, I don't think Brereton will be too disappointed with that in terms of this season at least, because I mean, you look at this squad now and you see how together they are as a unit. I think every single player seems to love being a part of that squad. So I don't think he'd be disappointed if he is kept in it for the next few months until the summer. And then if by some chance he is able to take the Rovers up that, or if he feels there is still a chance to go up potential next season or whatever, I don't think he'd have too much of a problem with that in terms of maybe considering the longer term contract. But in terms of the 12-month extension, I think that's an absolute must, and I don't think Brereton himself would be too concerned about that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an absolute certainty that will be triggered if he doesn't agree a long-term extension before January. Well, speaking of potential transfer, Football League World broke an exclusive last week revealing a number of clubs were interested in Brereton ahead of the January window. Leeds, Newcastle, Brighton, Southampton, even Burnley are apparently watching Brereton. I think that wouldn't go down very well if he ended up there. And Sevilla as well in La Liga are also said to be watching him. The Sun reporting that they were leading the chase over the weekend. Out of those teams, Toby, that we've just mentioned, is there any in particular you think would be a good fit for him? Should Rovers decide it's the right time to cash in and they do get the right money they feels acceptable to, let him go?
Yeah, it's a really interesting situation that to sort of look through the clubs that have been linked with him. I think Sevilla, that's got to be an appealing one for him, given sort of the chances that they could give him in terms of compete for trophies, competing in Europe. Obviously, sort of experience that sort of international football during his time with Chile. I think Sevilla have sort of got strong links with sort of that sort of South American region and all that. So that could be a good fit for him. In terms of the Premier League, there's some obviously interesting ones in there as well. I mean, for starters, Burnley, I think we should absolutely rule that out. I mean, from a sort of public relations point of view with the fans, I think it would be an absolute disaster for Rovers if they were to let him go there. Leeds, that's an interesting one again with the Bielsa link, from Chile and all that, and they do sort of need perhaps some centre forward support for Bamford. Newcastle, similar. There seems to be a bit of a reliance on, say, Sam Maximin and Wilson. But the question is, can he step up immediately? And that's the same sort of thing with Southampton as well. That's one that is interesting. I think you look at sort of who they've brought in recently, Shea Adams and from Birmingham, and of course Adam Armstrong from Blackburn last season. When they have made the step up from the Championship to the Premier League, it sort of took them a bit of time to get going, certainly in Adams' case. Hopefully we'll see that from Armstrong eventually. But whether they can afford to wait for Brereton to make that impact if he isn't going to step up immediately, I don't know, given sort of the position they're in the Premier League at the minute. But also, you've got to think from Southampton's point of view, that's really not a good show of faith in Adam Armstrong if within a few months of signing him, they're bringing in his replacement at Blackburn to score the goals. So that could be a risky perspective from sort of a man management point of view for Ralph Hasenhüttl. One I do quite like the idea of is Brighton. I think sort of his versatility across the front three could suit Graham Potter's style there, maybe. And also, one thing that could work for that deal is the fact that Rovers have got a couple of Brighton players on loan at the minute. Obviously, Red Cadre in attack himself, and Jan Paul van Hecke at centre back. Whether they need a centre back, I'm not sure. Sort of with the options they've got at the minute, but the Cadre sort of link is an interesting one. That could make it cheaper for Brighton if they can sort of, maybe negotiate a swap deal. We saw Rovers aren't against that, given the Obafemi Southampton links. Obviously, that didn't work out, but Rovers know Cadre can make an impact from what they've seen from him in the last few days. So that is one that and it's a big if, because obviously I don't think anyone from Rovers' perspective is going to want him to go. But if he was to go, if you send him to Brighton and perhaps look at Cadre coming the opposite way as maybe part of that, it does at least soften the blow in terms of it gives you another attacking option immediately, and it could work for Brighton in terms of whether they'd be able to pay the 20 million. I'm not sure, but that would make it cheaper for them from a financial perspective. So Rovers won't want him to go, but if he does, I think that's potentially one that could make a bit more sense than the others at the minute.
Yeah, I've got a comment, another one from EFL Lover here saying, not surprised he's being linked with Sevilla. Yeah, it makes sense considering, the South American link he's got now, and obviously Spanish clubs will be watching him very intently. I thought I'd personally stick my, 2 cents in for this one. I feel like I agree with you, Brighton, they do need to strengthen attack-wise in January. I think they're doing well right now, but, they lack the depth up front. I think Lacadia came on from out of the cold on Saturday against Leeds, and I think Brighton could just do a bit more support for Trossard and Maupay, and if they've got the cash to spend, it would be, a real typical Brighton signing, and like they've signed Maupay and Webster from the Championship in years gone by, so, it would make a lot of sense. And like you said, Toby Cadre and Van Hecke on loan from Brighton, so there's clearly good relations between the two clubs. And I think Newcastle as well, with the newfound riches, they need some new forwards to support Maximan and Wilson. And Brereton's someone who can play through the middle and out wide. So I think it wouldn't be a shock if he isn't being looked at by Eddie Howe. And again, Sevilla, a team who are, challenging in Europe, that could be a little bit of a head turner for Brereton. We've got another comment here from Liam. He says, do you think Blackburn could cope with their lost Brereton Diaz in January? I'm unsure Sam Gallagher could step up consistently. I think Gallagher's had a few injury struggles recently, and he has scored, I think, maybe 5 goals this season. Toby, he's obviously been playing out wide right and sometimes through the middle. But, if Brereton did go in January, surely they'd probably looking at a like-for-like replacement with the money they get, wouldn't they?
Yeah, definitely. I think in fairness to Sam Gallagher, when he has been fit and playing this season, he has been very good. And some of his goals this season, the quality of the finish has been absolutely outstanding. But the concern there is his fitness. And given Rovers didn't actually bring in a replacement for Adam Armstrong at centre forward during the summer, if they were to lose Brereton as well in January, then those injury problems for Gallagher, I mean, they simply couldn't rely on him as their sole centre forward option. I think as well, obviously, we've seen Ian Pervader's almost certainly going to be out for the vast majority, if not all, of the rest of the season. So if they lose Brereton without bringing someone in, then we're really down to just Gallagher and then Tyree Stolen and as we say, Red Cadre as the sort of attacking options with sort of genuine first team experience. I mean, in fairness, Dan Butterworth could sort of come in, but he's still very raw, and there's talks of a loan deal in January, so it would be a big change from that to then having to bring him back into the first team. So I like Gallagher. I'm a big fan of what he's doing at the minute. His work rate and everything is brilliant, and some of the goals he's scoring are really promising. But just with his fitness issues and the weight of expectation and everything, I think it'd be too much to rely simply on him, and they would have to bring someone else in. And I think there'd be the expectation there, sort of from an off the field basis as well, with the money that came in from Armstrong and that would have to come in for Brereton to go. There there would be questions asked if that then wasn't reinvested in a striker as well.
Yeah, I think Mark Obafemi and Josh Maja were both linked in the summer. I think Maja was in the building, but a back issue came up in the medical and he's still not played for Bordeaux this season. Maybe that's one that could potentially be revisited in January. We've got a comment from Wayne Walden here saying, I think Blackburn should keep Diaz till the end of the season, and that could potentially happen if no one meets the price tag. I think the report in the Sun this week said the Rovers have got a £20 million price tag on his head, and when you consider the goal record this season and the reputation boost he's had from playing for Chile, it does seem like a fair enough price, doesn't it, Toby, considering when the option's undoubtedly triggered, he's still got 18 months left on that deal. It's a little bit more than the club got for Armstrong, but they're in a slightly better position considering the contract. Do you think that's a fair price? If someone does bid for that, would you expect the board to accept a 20 million bid?
Yeah, I think that is a fair price for certain. I still think it's really interesting how much are they going to need to be convinced to part company with him in January. And really, I think that'd be a massive risk for them. I think if it was to be done, they would have to do it early in the window for me, give themselves enough time to sort of bring in a replacement if they really had to. Because again, looking back to sort of the Armstrong situation in the summer, they knew it seemed inevitable he was going to go, but it wasn't until sort of, I think it was the 11th of August around then when it was officially confirmed, and then so that still gave them, in fairness, a few weeks, but yet somehow we ended up in on deadline day trying to get a deal over the line for a good striker in Josh Maja, but one who is injured to the extent that he still hasn't played now several months down the line. So, if Brereton is to go, then it has to be quick. Then they can sort of rectify that and get someone in, potentially even two, given they've not really replaced Armstrong, and they would have the funds for that. But 20 million absolutely has to be a minimum for what Rovers would be parting company with in Diaz, especially when you consider, Armstrong went for 15 when he had 12 months left on his contract in January, and Brereton is pretty much matching his goals per game ratio at this stage of the season. Potentially, I think the Chilean is actually doing slightly better at this moment in time. So, yeah, 20 million has to be a minimum. And even then, it's a big question of, can we get someone in to replace him before we agree to this?
Yeah, definitely. Liam's back with a comment saying 20 million is bang on for Diaz, and I think a lot of people will agree with that from the form he's been showing since the summer. Certainly interesting to see where Brereton is when the mid-season window does slam shut on January 31st. And to conclude the debate, Toby, simply answering the question of the title, do you think Brereton is good enough for the Premier League at this stage of his career, and why or why not?
Ultimately, I mean, perhaps I'm being a bit biased here from a Rovers perspective, but I would possibly argue not just yet. I mean, as we say, this is really his first seriously prolific season, so there's always that sort of lingering question of will he be able to maintain that? And I think if you look back to sort of the Adam Armstrong situation, he's sort of been a bit slow to get going at Southampton at the minute in terms of his goals. He's only got a couple for them so far this season, and it's worth remembering, as we say, this is Brereton's first season in double figures in the Championship. Armstrong had 2 seasons in double figures in the Championship before he went to Southampton. He also had a bit more Premier League experience behind him, perhaps not in terms of game time, but in terms of training and being familiar with the infrastructure from when he was at Newcastle. And he was a couple of years older than Brereton is now. So I think in terms of that comparison, you might argue maybe Brereton's better off, giving it a couple more years, backing up this form he's showing now for Rovers, seeing if he can build on it, potentially even getting them to the top flight. But I mean, you could argue you take this on an individual basis, and just because one player hasn't worked doesn't mean another won't. So. And there's no doubt if he keeps playing like this for the rest of his career, he's going to be in the top flight, because this is form that is absolutely good enough to make an impact in the Premier League. So I can definitely see him in the next couple of years at the very least getting into the Premier League, and hopefully it's with Rovers. But if not, you couldn't begrudge him that chance with another team.
Yeah, I don't think any Blackburn fan will want him to leave in January or the summer or any time in the near future if the form is in. Well, thank you, Toby, for joining me this afternoon. A very enlightening discussion, even though as a Preston fan, it pains me to talk about a rival club potentially selling a player for 20 million, something we've not quite experienced yet. That's the last show from us today, but we've got plenty more coming up through the week, preview shows, debate shows, and betting shows. Please do drop this stream a like on YouTube. It really helps us get our content out there to more people, and it helps with the algorithm. Until next time, see you later.